48 hours ago, something happened that almost no one noticed. In that moment, Archangel Michael took his position, not in battle but in readiness. Not to strike, but to guard a transition already set in motion. Beside him stood Jesus, calm and unwavering, watching the human story with a depth that understands every hidden struggle, every silent night, every unanswered prayer. This wasn't a sudden decision. It was the release of something long prepared. For the person listening right now, life didn't suddenly explode into miracles. Instead, something subtler happened. A heaviness began to loosen. An old tension softened. A strange calm appeared that didn't match the chaos around you. Over the last 2 days, a chain you didn't even know had a name started losing its grip. Not dramatically, no loud breaking sound. Just less resistance, less weight, less fear driving every thought. A door you stopped knocking on years ago didn't open. But it moved. And that matters more than you realize. Because restoration doesn't arrive by dragging you backward. It arrives by reshaping what was lost into something stronger, wiser, and ready. Right now, you are standing between who you were trained to survive as, and who you are becoming without forcing it. That's why this moment feels different. Why the silence feels alive. Why your heart feels alert but not anxious. This isn't the end of a story. It's the middle of an unfolding one, and you're already inside it. If this resonates, if you felt this shift without knowing how to explain it, take a moment to connect. Tap the like button so this message reaches others who are feeling the same thing. Share it with someone who's been carrying quiet weight. And in the comments, simply write what these last 48 hours have felt like for you. You're not imagining this. Something began, and it's still moving. Folded hands. 48 hours ago, something subtle yet immense shifted beyond what the eyes can register. It wasn't marked by thunder or headlines, not announced by alarms or visible signs in the sky. It arrived quietly, the way the most important moments often do, slipping into existence without asking for permission. In the unseen realm, awareness sharpened, attention gathered. Not panic, not urgency, but a focused stillness settled in, the kind that happens when something long anticipated is finally close enough to feel. It was as if the air itself leaned forward, listening. In that heightened awareness, Michael stands fully alert, not with a raised sword or a posture of threat, but with the calm readiness of a guardian who understands timing better than force. There is no anger in his stance, no warning being issued, no demand made. His presence is steady, disciplined, and precise, anchored in the understanding that some moments are protected not by interruption, but by patience. He watches the sequence unfold, aware that alignment must precede action, and that premature movement can disrupt what is meant to mature naturally. Jesus remains present as well, not distant, not removed, but observing human struggle with a quiet authority that doesn't need to announce itself. There is no rush in his gaze. He sees exhaustion without judgment, confusion without disappointment, and perseverance without spectacle. His attention rests not on spectacle, but on sincerity. What matters here is not how loudly faith is spoken, but how deeply it has been lived in private moments when no one was watching. The focus is not on intervention yet, but on alignment, on whether the internal landscape of a life is ready to receive what has already been approved. That alignment didn't begin 48 hours ago. It began long before, in a life that was already carrying pressure, already navigating weight that never made it into conversation. Just before this shift, the listener's world likely felt heavy in ways that were difficult to explain. There was lingering exhaustion that sleep didn't seem to touch, a tiredness that went deeper than the body. Questions remained unanswered, prayers felt suspended midair, and explanations never arrived when they were most needed. There may have been a quiet resignation, not dramatic despair, but the kind that comes from doing everything you know how to do and still not seeing movement. These were battles without witnesses, struggles handled internally, moments of doubt processed alone, strength summoned in silence because there was no alternative. On the outside, life may have appeared unchanged. Routines continued, Responsibilities were met. Conversation stayed surface level, but beneath that steady exterior, something was being worn down and rebuilt at the same time. The groundwork was already being laid, even though it didn't feel productive or purposeful. It felt like waiting without explanation, endurance without affirmation. Nothing outward shifted immediately when the unseen realm heightened its awareness. No sudden breakthrough announced itself. No instant relief washed over everything. And yet, the internal atmosphere subtly changed. What once felt like endless delay began to carry a different weight, not lighter yet, but meaningful. Looking back now, those delays begin to reveal their purpose. The doors that stayed closed, the opportunities that didn't materialize, the timelines that refused to cooperate all start to look less like rejection and more like protection. What once felt like stagnation now appears intentional, not as a test designed to frustrate, but as preparation that required time. Some doors couldn't open because what waited on the other side demanded a stronger foundation. Some answers couldn't arrive because the right questions hadn't fully formed yet. The last 48 hours don't erase the waiting, but they reframe it. They suggest that nothing was wasted, that every pause served a function, that every delay carried information. There is tension in that realization, because it challenges the idea that progress must always feel like movement. Sometimes progress feels like standing still while everything internal rearranges itself. Sometimes growth looks like patience stretched thin, like hope held together by routine, like faith practiced quietly rather than proclaimed loudly. As this meaning becomes clearer, the emotional pressure shifts. It doesn't disappear, but it transforms. What was once frustrating becomes heavy with anticipation. At the very beginning of this 48-hour window, decisions were set in motion. Not rushed decisions, not reactions, but confirmations of what had already been agreed upon. In the Celestial Council, nothing is impulsive. Timing is treated with reverence. Michael stands ready not to create conflict, but to remove resistance when the moment arrives. Resistance doesn't always look like opposition. Sometimes it looks like lingering doubt, old patterns, or attachments that no longer fit the future being prepared. Jesus speaks of restoration not as a possibility, but as something already approved, simply awaiting release. Restoration here doesn't mean returning to how things were before the struggle began. It means integration. It means bringing together the lessons learned, the strength developed, and the clarity gained into something new and sustainable. Nothing is rushed because rushing would cheapen the process. Everything is synchronized, aligned across realms and timelines in a way that respects both divine order and human readiness. From a human perspective, this synchronization can feel invisible. It can feel like nothing is happening, like effort is going unnoticed. But beneath that surface stillness, layers are adjusting. Circumstances are lining up. Internal readiness is being assessed. The alignment being observed isn't about perfection. It's about honesty. About whether the heart is willing to receive without fear, whether the mind is open to change without resistance, whether the soul is prepared to step forward without needing every detail spelled out in advance. For those in the United States especially, where life often moves fast and value is placed on visible results, this kind of waiting can feel unnatural. There is pressure to produce, to show progress, to explain delays. But this moment asks for a different metric. It asks for trust in unseen movement, respect for timing that doesn't conform to schedules, and recognition that some of the most important shifts happen internally before they ever show up externally. As the last 48 hours continue to unfold, the sense of being watched is not meant to create fear or pressure. It is meant to offer reassurance. Attention implies care. Awareness implies intention. Nothing about this moment is accidental, and nothing about your experience has been overlooked. The exhaustion mattered. The unanswered questions mattered. The silent endurance mattered. They weren't signs of failure. They were indicators of readiness being forged. The alignment being observed now is gentle but precise. It doesn't demand immediate change or dramatic declarations. It simply waits for the internal and external to meet at the right point. When that happens, movement will feel natural rather than forced. Doors will open without needing to be pushed. Conversations will shift without being rehearsed. Opportunities will arrive that fit rather than overwhelm. Folded hands. Since the moment this event began, the changes haven't announced themselves loudly. They arrived quietly, almost politely, slipping into awareness in ways that were easy to dismiss at first. Yet if you pause and look closely, you can feel them. There is a calm present now that doesn't logically match the circumstances around you. The external pressures may still exist, the responsibilities haven't vanished, the unanswered questions haven't all been resolved, and yet there is a steadiness underneath it all that wasn't there before. It's not excitement and it's not denial. It's a grounded calm, the kind that settles in when something deep within you senses that it is no longer alone in holding everything together. Along with that calm, there has been a subtle easing of emotional pressure. Not a dramatic release, not a moment where everything suddenly feels light and perfect, but a noticeable softening. Thoughts that once felt sharp have dulled slightly. Emotional weight that used to press constantly against your chest has loosened its grip just enough for you to breathe more freely. What makes this change strange is that it hasn't come with a clear explanation. Nothing specific may have happened to justify it. No external validation arrived to confirm it, and yet it's there. The body feels it before the mind understands it. Even if you haven't consciously acknowledged it, you are already responding to what has shifted. Your reactions are different. Your internal dialogue sounds less harsh. Your patience lasts a little longer than it did before. Small irritations don't hook into you the way they used to. This isn't because you've suddenly become someone else. It's because the internal environment has changed just enough to allow a new response to emerge. Alignment doesn't always feel like clarity at first. Sometimes it feels like relief without a reason. As these inner sensations continue, something else has been happening beneath the surface over the last 48 hours. A restriction that once felt constant has begun to weaken. Not dramatically, not in a way that draws attention to itself, but steadily. There is less resistance now, less internal friction when you consider moving forward, trying again, or imagining something different from what you've known. The unseen chain that once kept certain thoughts, choices, or possibilities tightly bound has started to loosen link by link. There was no loud snap, no moment of triumph, just a gradual realization that old patterns don't carry the same authority they once did. Habits of thought that used to feel automatic now feel optional. Beliefs that once dictated your limits now feel negotiable. The familiar pull back into what's known, even if it was painful, has lost some of its strength. This is important because true change rarely begins with action. It begins when resistance weakens enough to allow movement to even be considered. As that resistance fades, space is being created. Space in the mind to imagine something new without immediately dismissing it. Space in the emotions to hope without bracing for disappointment. Space in your sense of self to grow beyond roles and identities that once felt fixed. This space doesn't demand that you fill it right away. It simply exists, waiting, making room for what couldn't fit there before. Within this newly created space, something long dormant has begun to respond. A door that had been sealed for years, so still that it almost faded from memory, has reacted to the shift. This door represents more than an opportunity. It represents a part of your life that you may have stopped checking on because it never seemed to move. You may have assumed it was permanently closed, or worse, that it was never meant for you at all. Over time, you learned to walk past it without looking. Now, without effort or force, that door has begun to move. It hasn't opened yet. There's no dramatic reveal, no sudden clarity about what lies beyond it, but the lock is no longer holding it shut. There is a responsiveness there that hasn't existed in a very long time. You can feel it intuitively. A sense of possibility returns, not fully formed, not explained, but present enough to be noticed. This is why there is both anticipation and uncertainty in the air. You can sense opportunity without being able to define it. You can feel change approaching without knowing its shape. And that can be uncomfortable for a mind that wants guarantees and timelines. But this stage is not about certainty. It's about recognition. Recognition that movement has begun. Recognition that what was once inaccessible is now responding. Recognition that the unfolding is active, even if it remains incomplete. Nothing here requires you to rush or decide anything yet. The door doesn't need to be forced open. It simply needs to be acknowledged. Its movement confirms that the alignment taking place is real and effective. The calm you feel, the easing pressure, the loosening chains, and the responsive door are all connected. They are signs of internal readiness meeting external timing. The unfolding continues not as a sudden leap, but as a deliberate progression. Each subtle shift prepares the way for the next. Each moment of calm strengthens your ability to receive what's coming. Each weakened pattern frees up energy that was once spent maintaining what no longer serves you. And as this process continues, the sense of being on the edge of something meaningful grows stronger, not because everything is clear, but because everything is finally moving. Folded hands. What is taking shape now isn't a simple return to something familiar. It isn't a rewind to how things were before loss, before disappointment, before the long stretch of endurance. The restoration forming in this moment moves forward, not backward. What is returning carries new contours, new depth, and a different kind of strength. It holds memory without being trapped by it. The unfolding event reshapes what was broken instead of pretending it never happened. The pain you've carried isn't being erased, and it doesn't need to be. It has already done its work. It taught discernment, patience, humility, and resilience in ways comfort never could. But that pain no longer leads. It no longer sits in the driver's seat directing your choices or defining your expectations. Instead, it takes its place as a reference point, a chapter rather than the whole story. The future being prepared for you isn't heavy with the same weight you've been dragging. It carries wisdom instead, the kind that makes progress sustainable rather than exhausting. As this restoration continues to form, there is a noticeable shift happening at the level of identity. Over the last 48 hours, you may have sensed something subtle but profound. The way you think about yourself doesn't land the same way it used to. Old definitions begin to feel inaccurate, like clothes that no longer fit properly. Labels you once relied on to explain yourself now feel incomplete. This isn't confusion, it's transition. You are standing between who you have been and who you are becoming. The old self isn't disappearing abruptly, and the emerging one hasn't fully arrived yet. There is overlap here, and that can feel disorienting. You may catch yourself reacting in new ways one moment and falling back into familiar patterns the next. That doesn't mean you're failing. It means the shift is real and still integrating. Identity doesn't change overnight. It settles gradually as the internal and external begin to match. Strength in this phase doesn't show up as effort or force. It appears as steadiness, as the ability to remain present without bracing for impact, as the choice to respond rather than react. There is less need to prove resilience because resilience has become internalized. You don't have to push yourself to endure anymore. Endurance is already there, quietly supporting you without drawing attention to itself. After the initial movement of this unfolding, something else becomes noticeable. The unseen realm grows quiet again, not silent in absence, but calm in assurance. The heightened alertness gives way to stability. Michael remains present, still attentive, but the tension has eased. Readiness replaces vigilance. The sense of waiting shifts into confidence that what has been set in motion will complete its course. Jesus offers peace in this quieter phase, not as an emotional high, but as a signal of balance. This peace doesn't demand that everything be perfect. It simply confirms that nothing is out of control, that what is unfolding no longer requires constant adjustment or protection. The foundations are set. The alignment holds. Movement can now continue without noise, without urgency, without disruption. This calm is not an ending. It is a stabilizing pause within the process, a moment where integration happens beneath the surface, where identity settles, restoration continues to take shape, and wisdom finds its place in the future that's forming. You are not meant to rush through this space. It allows what has shifted internally to root itself deeply enough to last. The unfolding continues quietly now, carried by momentum rather than force. Nothing needs to be announced. Nothing needs to be defended. What has begun is stable, intentional, and forward-moving. And as you stand here between what was and what is emerging, there is a growing sense that this transition is not something you need to survive, but something you are fully capable of inhabiting as it gently carries you into what comes next. As awareness settles around what has taken place, the meaning of this 48-hour window becomes clearer. This wasn't a random spike of emotion or a rare spiritual moment reserved for a select few. It wasn't accidental, and it wasn't borrowed from someone else's experience. It was personal, shaped specifically to your timing, your capacity, and your readiness. Nothing about it needed to be announced publicly because readiness doesn't arrive with noise. It arrives quietly, internally, when the foundation is finally strong enough to hold what's next. What matters most is that this alignment didn't wait for you to feel confident or fully prepared on the surface. It recognized something deeper. It recognized the internal work already done, the endurance already proven, and the honesty already present. You didn't step into this alignment by crossing a visible threshold. You realized, perhaps slowly, that you were already inside it. The calm, the softening resistance, the shifting identity all point to the same truth. This moment didn't begin outside of you. It met you where you already were. As the alignment holds, the path ahead begins to show itself, but not in overwhelming detail. The future doesn't rush forward with a full map or a list of instructions. Only the next step becomes visible. That can feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you're used to needing certainty before moving. But this is intentional. Clarity grows in proportion to trust, not demand. Each step reveals the next, and nothing more is required right now. With this gradual clarity, fear starts to lose its urgency. It doesn't vanish instantly, but it no longer commands immediate attention. The unknown doesn't feel threatening in the same way it once did. Instead of bracing for what could go wrong, your focus shifts toward what is unfolding correctly. Trust begins to replace anticipation. There is less obsession with outcomes and more confidence in direction. You don't need to know exactly where the path leads to take the step that's in front of you. This shift doesn't make you passive, it makes you present. You're no longer racing ahead mentally or replaying the past emotionally. You're here, grounded in what is happening now, responding instead of predicting. That presence is what allows the path to stay visible. When fear quiets, perception sharpens. When urgency fades, intuition becomes easier to hear. Looking back, the last 48 hours stand out not as a dramatic climax, but as a clear beginning. Something initiated itself here, something that will continue to unfold long after this moment passes. This was not a conclusion or a resolution. It was a threshold, and everything that came before it served a purpose, even when it felt unnecessary or unfair. Nothing from your past was wasted, not the delays that tested your patience, not the silences that made you question whether anything was listening, not the struggles that forced you to grow stronger without applause. Each one fed into this moment, shaping the internal readiness that made this alignment possible. Every pause refined discernment. Every setback strengthened endurance. Every unanswered question widened your capacity to trust without control. The story isn't finished here. It's finally moving forward with intention. The momentum is quiet, steady, and sustainable. You don't need to chase it or prove yourself to it. You are already part of it. And as it continues, it carries with it the assurance that what began in stillness will continue in clarity, unfolding step by step in a way that honors both where you've been and where you are now prepared to go. 48 hours ago, the unseen shifted again. Not loudly, but decisively. Archangel Michael remained watchful, while Jesus stood in calm assurance, as something already set in motion moved closer to completion. What began quietly is now gaining clarity, and the stillness around you carries meaning. If this moment reached you, let it connect you. Tap the like button, share this with someone who needs hope, and tell us in the comments what you felt as you listened. The story is still unfolding, and you're part of it.